This is the two main breaking news things that I was telling you guys about. I've got this one and I've got the other one that I want to record on here so it don't take as much time. So this is the best way I know to show it in one video for you, okay? So listen up.
David Muir. Good afternoon. I'm David Muir at ABC News headquarters in New York, and we do want to take you to pictures at this hour. We are monitoring a situation in Berlin that appears to be perhaps a terrorist attack of some sort. At first, they weren't sure whether this was an accident or not, but at this hour, police now say they suspect it was a deliberate attack. You're looking at pictures coming in from Berlin at this hour showing stalls knocked over. There are reports from witnesses on the scene of people lying injured on the ground. And here's what we know so far is that a truck barreled into a crowd. It's believed that this was a Christmas gathering, a scene of Christmas shopping in Berlin's main shopping street in the city's western portion of that city. And when we heard reports initially, there was concern that this could be related to terrorism because of the warnings we are all aware of. We've been reporting on them for quite some time here by European security services following other plots that had been uncovered. Of course, over the summer, you'll remember the plot that was carried out in Nice, the truck that was driven into scores of victims. It was rented, a 19-ton refrigerated truck that killed so many. We do know at this hour, Berlin police now reporting 9 people dead, several injured, and of course the fears at this early point is that that number could go much higher. As we continue to look at these pictures, I want to bring in our senior justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, because Pierre, you have reported often about the worries that something like this would be carried out.
Exactly, David. Again, just a horrific scene playing out in Berlin. As you said, 9 people killed, many more injured. Law enforcement has been warning about the potential of such a type of attack for some months now. In November, the State Department issued a warning to Americans traveling abroad in Europe in particular to be concerned about large gatherings, that terrorist attacks could take place. Again, we don't know precisely yet that this was a terrorist attack, but that is the feeling, and the indicators are pointing toward that at the moment. And again, even in the U.S. during the Thanksgiving celebration, law enforcement officials had issued generic warnings, even though they had no specific information of an attack, to be on alert at large gatherings. And in recent weeks, we had the case in Ohio State where a man using a vehicle tried to mow down people here inside the United States. So, David, as you said, this has been an ongoing, active concern.
And of course, early on, as these headlines came in, early reporting indicated that this could have also been simply an accident, a truck into a crowd. Berlin police reporting it jumped the pavement and headed into a populated area in the city's western portion where it's believed there's a significant amount of Christmas shopping, obviously, this time of year. The BBC reporting witnesses describing a, quote, gruesome scene, and that police are beginning to evolve in their thinking. They do now suspect this was a deliberate attack, though we await confirmation on that. I want to bring in our chief foreign correspondent, Terry Moran. And Terry, you reported on the situation over the summer in Nice, and as Pierre has reported here, and Brian Ross as well, authorities not only in this country but around the world have been concerned about vehicles being used in these terrorist attacks.
It is, David, the latest atrocious method that these terrorists have decided to pick up and use because it's so effective and it's so hard to defend against. And I have to tell you, living in London, for many people in the major cities and elsewhere in Europe, it feels as if sometimes we are living under siege. These warnings come repeatedly, especially during the holiday season. In London and other cities, Americans and locals have been warned about going to holiday markets, to shopping malls, to the kinds of places, frankly, that help make the holiday season, decked out with festive lights and all kinds of people having a great time. Those are the juicy targets for these terrorists, and you are absolutely
don't pay
right.
to get outdoors nowadays,
which are so
or to enjoy your
so
life.
Deadly and so hard to guard against. Think how many trucks are on the roads that drive around these cities.
Yep.
Living in Europe has become psychologically stressful, almost at times like living in siege.
Terry, thank you. Brian Ross is standing by, our chief investigative correspondent. And Brian, I should caution that as we're watching these pictures come in, that we certainly don't have confirmed reports that this was a deliberate act, but as time moves on, it appears more and more likely. There are witnesses who reported the truck plowing into this Christmas market. Terry just mentioned the several warnings. The real worries, particularly within Europe, that vehicles can now be used by people trying to make a statement. And in this case, there had been heightened alert, particularly around the holiday season, not only in Europe, but as you know, Brian, right here in the U.S.
Yep.
Exactly right, Terry. ISIS has been calling again and again on its followers
Yep.
to use simple means of attack, a knife or a vehicle of some sort. And as you recall, in their most recent posting, they put a picture of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York on the cover of the warning and the alert to their followers. That led to extraordinary precautions in New York during the Thanksgiving Day Parade. There were no incidents, but we do know as a fact that as ISIS has lost territory and seems to be suffering defeat after defeat on the battlefield in Iraq and Syria, they have ramped up their efforts for their followers to attack such soft targets as the Christmas market in Germany or the Bastille Day celebration in Paris, in East France.
Throughout the U.S.
This is considered a sort of
that
a
they are
trademark,
harboring in.
By ISIS. Nothing fancy, nothing spectacular. A simple truck rented can cause great damage, as we're seeing in these pictures.
And as you reported on here, you mentioned the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. There had been some concern, certainly stepped up security in and around New York City to prevent this kind of incident from playing out here. And I should just, again, caution everyone watching this at home that while certainly we don't have confirmation from Berlin police at this hour that this was in fact a deliberate attack, there had been warnings about this kind of incident happening. Our own State Department issuing in late November a travel alert for all Americans saying that ISIS and Al-Qaeda and their affiliates continue to plan terrorist attacks in Europe with a focus on the upcoming holiday season and associated events. Our entire team, Pierre, Brian, Terry, will continue to work this story, and we'll come back on the air if events warrant. In the meantime, we'll have team coverage coming up tonight on World News Tonight. I'm David Muir.
All right, now you guys done got that one? Check this out. Hang on, let me get it.
I want to bring in our senior international correspondent, Clarissa Ward. She is following this story from Moscow. And Clarissa, we hear the gunman shouting. I believe he's shouting in Turkish. Do we know what he is saying?
Well, we know that he repeatedly talks about Aleppo. Aleppo, of course, the city in Syria that has been ravaged over the past few months, and particularly in the past few weeks. He says we must remember Aleppo. He also says Allahu Akbar. Of course, that is is Arabic for God is the greatest. But what we don't know exactly is who this man was affiliated with. Was he a lone wolf attacker? Was he part of a militant group like ISIS? We simply just don't have any information. You can hear in his voice in that chilling video, and it is just so disturbing to watch it, that he is clearly incredibly emotional, angry. You can hear the strain in his voice. And often, it's fair to say that across the Muslim world, you have seen some very emotional and intense responses to the daily barrage of images coming out of Syria, coming out of Aleppo, images of civilians being killed, of children being bombed, of people starving to death, having no food, no water. So those images have served as a rallying cry to jihadists and extremists across the world. But it's not clear yet if the attacker who you saw there falls into the bracket of one of those more extremist jihadist groups that we know about, or whether he may simply be sympathetic to the cause of the rebels inside Syria. Now, what we do have coming into us, Brianna, from the Russian Foreign Ministry, Russia's Foreign Ministry has responded to the murder of its ambassador in Turkey, and they have said this: we qualify what happened as a terror attack. We're currently in contact with Turkish authorities who are assuring us that a thorough, comprehensive investigation will be conducted. Murderers will be punished. Terrorism won't sustain. We will fight it. So some pretty strong words there from the Russian Foreign Ministry. The onus now very much on Turkish authorities to investigate who this man was, why he was there. This was a diplomatic party.
And where was the security at?
Russian photographs in the capital, Ankara. Many of Ankara's elites will have been there, people in diplomatic circles. It raises serious security questions as to how he was able to get in there. Was it possibly some kind of an inside job? And really, I think, Brianna, as well, this starts to put the relationship between Russia and Turkey, which had just in the last 6 months started to get back on course. It threatens some of the progress that relationship had made. One final note I want to add, Brianna, there's supposed to be here in Moscow a big summit tomorrow on Syria. Turkey's foreign minister in attendance, Iran's foreign minister in attendance, as well, of course, as Russia's foreign minister and Russia's defense minister. Unclear whether the focus of that will shift. And of course, all of this then having a knock-on effect in terms of what's going on in Aleppo. Russia and Turkey were working very closely together to broker this truce that was allowing the evacuations, which had just started again today. So a lot of things being called into question by this horrible act, Brianna.
And diplomatic circles across the world just shaken by this. Clarissa Ward, thank you so much for that report. We're going to turn now to the Electoral College. We're going to talk about the...
All right, got all that.
ISIS operatives attacked Paris, targeting bars, restaurants, a concert hall, and a stadium, shooting as many people as they could before blowing themselves up. By the end of the massacre, the worst terrorist attack in Europe in a decade, 130 people were dead. Now, for the first time, CNN has gained access to thousands of pages of documents and photos from the internal European investigation, which shed new light on the sophisticated network ISIS uses to coordinate terror attacks across Europe. The documents reveal another suspected terrorist, never before made public, who investigators linked to the cell that carried out the Paris attacks. He was on the loose in Europe for more than 6 months. Other ISIS operatives are right now believed to be living among ordinary citizens in Europe, plotting other strikes directed by senior ISIS handlers in Syria, according to multiple sources. Within days of the shocking rampage in Paris, police learned that 2 of the 3 suicide bombers at the Stade de France stadium entered Europe by posing as Syrian refugees. These surveillance photos, never seen before publicly, show the bombers as they approach their target. This is the moment they detonate their devices. But according to the documents, 2 more men were part of the ISIS cell. They traveled the same refugee route as the suicide bombers, blending in with thousands of people from war-torn countries. Their names are Adil Haddadi and Mohammed Uzman. They were eventually arrested, and records of their capture and interrogation obtained by CNN show how ISIS supported the attackers throughout their mission. This is their story, based mainly on multiple interrogations of Haddadi. Early October, 6 weeks before the Paris attacks, the documents show their journey began in Raqqa, Syria, the capital of the self-declared ISIS caliphate. The men didn't know each other's real names or what their mission would be. According to the documents, Haddadi later tells investigators he only knew they were being sent to France to do something for the good of God. Much of their journey was directed by a shadowy ISIS leader in Syria known only as Abu Ahmed, who arranged meetings, cell phones, money, and transportation for them. Jean-Charles Brizard is a French expert on terrorism. We asked him to analyze the documents obtained by CNN.
Abu Ahmed is clearly an ISIS operative. He's key in sending those individuals, at least the foreigners, into the Paris attacks, because he's the one who recruited them, who financed them, who trained them, who provided electronic devices to them, telephones. He was always in contact with them.
According to the transcripts of interrogations, Haddadi and Uzman, along with the 2 Paris attackers, traveled from Raqqa across the Turkish border onto the coastal city of Izmir, switching vehicles, picking up cash, passed from one smuggler to the next along the way. They receive instructions from their ISIS handler in Syria through encrypted apps such as Telegram and WhatsApp. Throughout their journey, they're only given enough money and information to get to the next stop.
ISIS is accelerating its international attack planning
It's increasingly sophisticated in the way it does this. It's set up an intricate logistical support system for these terrorist cells throughout Europe.
In the middle of the night, the team makes the treacherous crossing to Greece in a boat filled with dozens of refugees. They're picked up by the Greek Navy along the way. The two bombers who would eventually attack the Paris stadium make it through and start moving steadily north toward their target. But Haddadi and Usman's fake Syrian passports are discovered. They're arrested and their money is taken. They're held in Greece for about a month. Greek officials would not say why they were released, but authorities believe that delay was significant. They would not have a chance to become part of the Paris attacks. Haddadi tells investigators they contact their ISIS handler Abu Ahmed, who arranges another 2,000 euros for them. Flush with cash, the pair continue along the refugee route. As they work their way across Europe, Usman, identified by investigators as a bomb maker from a Pakistani terror group, passes the hours doing something strikingly un-Islamic, looking at porn. Documents show he visited almost 24 porn sites on his phone. November 14th, the day after the Paris attacks, Haddadi and Usman arrive in Salzburg, Austria. They apply for asylum and end up in this refugee center where they stay for weeks. According to CNN sources, authorities now believe that Haddadi and Usman were not only part of the same terror cell as the Paris bombers, but also that they were planning another attack. The documents show that they were in contact with people in several European countries and were researching travel to France. Investigators believe they were waiting for a third man to join them, a mysterious ISIS operative called Abed Tabauni. Tabauni has never been publicly named until now. Like Usman and Haddadi, he traveled from Syria along the refugee route, carrying a phone number linked to the terror cell of the ringleader of the Paris attacks, according to the documents, as well as a photo of Islamic State fighters standing before their flag. December 10th, nearly a month after the Paris attacks, Tabauni finally arrives at the refugee center where Usman and Haddadi are. Later the very same day, police raid the center. Usman and Haddadi are arrested. Here's what happened next, according to the documents. In the scramble, Haddadi tries unsuccessfully to get rid of his SIM card. Tabauni is nowhere to be seen. Haddadi denies knowing him, but investigators find this, Tabauni's cell phone charging right beside Haddadi's bed. It has Haddadi's phone number saved in it. Also in that phone, a photo taken just 30 minutes before the raid. It shows Tabauni sitting on a bed in the refugee center right next to where Haddadi and Usman slept.
We can assume that Tabauni was also part of the same plot and was instructed to carry out an attack.
From the time he slipped away last December, Tabauni has been a wanted man, according to CNN sources, who also confirm he was finally arrested in July. The documents show this is the Facebook page Tabauni had on his phone, and in recent months it appears he was publicly posting updates from Belgium. Investigators are now analyzing 1,600 pages of data from his phone, and sources tell CNN they are moving to extradite him to Austria and to tie him to Haddadi and Usman and the Paris attackers.
Are you concerned that there may be many others who use the same route who you just didn't know about?
Yes, we've seen that in the recent weeks. Several of them, individuals who carry out individual attacks, inspired attacks, were coming back from Syria using the same route.
So there's a possibility that there are many more that you just don't know about.
There is a high possibility.
The documents show Haddadi's phone has also proven to be a treasure trove for investigators, revealing an ISIS network that fanned out through southern and northern Europe. He had dozens of contacts. Some gave advice on crossing borders and evading the law. One tells Haddadi that he was able to sneak into France by hiding in the bathroom of a train. December 15th, 5 days after the raid, ISIS handler Abu Ahmed reaches out to his operatives Haddadi and Usman, perhaps wondering about their silence. "How are you?" he writes. "What's become of you?" There is no reply.
The group is responsible for over 50 attacks on U.S. soil and has over 35 compounds right here in our very own nation. Now, a new investigation by the Christian Action Network has uncovered some disturbing information about the spread of homegrown terrorists and what they mean for America. It's a frightening thought. Islamic terrorist training camps right here in America, in our backyards. The group Muslims of America, or Jamaat al-Furqa, as they're called in Pakistan, have established over 35 communities across the U.S. The group claims to be peaceful, but a videotape uncovered by the Christian Action Network shows that they can have a much more sinister side. The video called The Soldiers of Allah features Sheikh Mubarak Ali Ghanali, the mastermind and the leader of the group here in the U.S.
We are establishing training camps in villages, at university offices in upstate New York, or in Canada, or in Michigan, or in South Carolina, or in Pakistan, wherever we are, you can reach us.
The tape goes on to teach Ghalani's American followers tactics in guerrilla warfare, including scaling mountains, subduing enemies, murdering guards, hijacking cars, kidnapping, weapons training, and setting off explosives. Ghalani is a Pakistani national best known for allegedly setting up journalist Daniel Pearl in 2002. Pearl was on the way to meet with him when he was abducted and eventually gruesomely beheaded. Armed with the, quote, Soldier of Allah training video and a history of Ghalani's terrorist rhetoric, investigators went to several of the compounds to confront his followers.
You are a liar, and you're a liar.
Don't say another word. Understand? They were met with denial, hostility, and in some cases even violence.
Clearly looks like either knife holes or bullet holes.
And the question remains, why have these communities been left to flourish here in the U.S.? And is it only a matter of time before this anger spills on over into a violent incident? And Martin Moyer now joins us. 35 facilities in the U.S. Tell me this is not true, and how does this continue to exist?
Now, there's 35 compounds, villages, communities that Sheikh Jilani has inside the United States. They range anywhere from the east coast of New York, South Carolina, to the west coast, Seattle, Washington, Hancock, New York, down to Texas.
Knowing the extremism that you're talking about, that he advocates here, and this is not in dispute, correct?
No, it's not in dispute.
Then why would the United States government allow these facilities to stay open?
Well, we spent 2.5 years investigating this group, and during that time, we interviewed law enforcement about why these facilities are allowed to exist in the United States. We got a host of reasons, but the number one reason is they are protected by the U.S. Constitution, and they are protected by state constitutions in the United States. Really, law enforcement's hands are tied in trying to shut these groups down.
I want you to explain to our audience here, because you're describing this particular man, his involvement, you say, in the Daniel Pearl, beheading. How certain are you that every one of those compounds shares the radical views?
We went to 7 of these compounds. We had the Soldiers of Allah videotape, which your viewers just watched, and we said we're going to set out on a mission. We're going to visit the 7 compounds we were aware of and ask their leaders to watch this tape, either accept or reject Sheikh Jilani's call to be an Islamic guerrilla warfare training camp. None of them rejected that tape.
How is he connected specifically to each and every compound?
Well, each and every compound is owned by a group called Muslims of America. Muslims of America in the United States is their American name for a group based in Pakistan called Jamaat al-Furqa.
Which is the one that he is, and these are his words, and this is what his advocacy is. So in other words, let me guess, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, so that when you went to these 7 compounds of the 35, if they were to condemn the statements of him, that would mean to them what? For them what?
Actually, none of them would condemn him. These people believe Sheikh Jilani is a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, that he speaks for the Prophet Muhammad. They follow him with utmost loyalty. They believe basically he is speaking for the word of Allah. They will not condemn him. They will not criticize him. That's what we learned. As a matter of fact, in one camp in Jessup, Georgia, one of the leaders watched the Soldiers of Allah videotape and said, what's wrong with Sheikh Jilani setting up paramilitary training camps inside the United States? I encourage your viewers to watch this tape, just see what happens.
Do you think Jilani's facilities in the U.S. are planning attacks on American cities? And it It's almost unimaginable in a post 9/11 world that could exist. You're saying you think that they're planning, plotting, scheming the next attack against the Americans.
Not only do I believe that, not only will people who watch this documentary believe that, but even the law enforcement officials that we have spoken with, not the ones based in Washington, D.C., but the field officers, they believe that. We've had law enforcement tell us they have weapons of mass destruction, that they...
What kind of weapons of mass destruction?
Well, in some cases I can't even tell you, Sean, because the confidential information that was given to me by these particular law enforcement officials...
So you're saying without a doubt, you could look in these cameras tonight and tell the American people that there are terrorist training camps on our soil, we're not doing anything about it, and they're planning, and they will hit America.
I would say without a doubt, Al-Qaeda would love to have such compounds that range from 25 acres to 300 acres sitting on American soil in order to hide terrorists, hide weapons, and train future jihadists for the United States. It's shocking.
Mr. Moore, it's shocking. Thank you for being with us. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. There's all the news that we need to know about, and if you ain't heard about it, you do now. So I've been keeping my ears and eyes open because they're on U.S. soil and they are making a name for themselves. And from what I just heard to what you just heard, sounds like they're protected, and I don't see how, but I hope that ain't the case. But I'm hoping somebody somewhere somehow can knock them out of here, because if not, hate to say it, but looks like we're pretty much in the dirt, unless Trump can do something or somebody can do something. But like I said, they done attacked 9/11. They did San Bernardino. They did Paris. They've done other states. They've killed more people than we can kill ourselves. So, watch who you make friends with and be careful wherever you're at, because we're not safe. And we're not going to be safe until we get a handle on this and knock them out of the situation. So, there it is. And that's the way things are looking.